Jeff, can you confirm the agenda is showing? I think you're muted, Jeff.
Yeah, I have to get off mute. Yes, it is showing, Ryan.
All right. All right, so we're rolling. Technology's working so far. Off to a good start. So again, good morning. This is 1 second ago, background here. All right, so this is the second North Falcon meeting. We shared and distributed all the materials through the compact distribution yesterday afternoon. Materials are posted online on the WDFW North of Falcon website, and we are displaying this. And so we're gonna move to ground rules, but I wanted to give you a heads up that we will be recording this meeting. So Leah, if you can go ahead and hit the record button.
We're recording. Perfect,
thank you. So these are kind of standard set of ground rules. Just want to walk through it real quick. I already mentioned we'll be recording this. They'll be probably available online in 2 or 3 business days. It takes a little bit to kind of post them, but just letting you know they'll be there at the WDFW North Falcon website. For those who have dialed in to unmute, you can hit *6 to mute or unmute, or obviously there's the mic button. You can mute or unmute as well. So just ask everyone stay muted unless you're speaking and it's your turn. We will not monitor chat for any questions or comments. It's purely used for technical assistance. Also, and or raising your hand if you can't figure out how to use the raise your hand feature. We ask that everyone focus on the task at hand. We will stick to the agenda. Public comment period may be cut short if necessary to stay on track with the agenda. The meeting after we get through the breakouts will conclude at 1 p.m. We ask only one person speak at a time. Use the raise hand feature, or when I ask for a speaking list, provide me your name and I'll add you to the list and we'll go in order. Be respectful of everyone else. That starts with being on mute. We do ask that you identify yourself when you speak so everyone knows who's speaking, and if requested by staff, please identify yourself as well. It's fine to be tough on issues and questions, but not on other people or organizations. We have expectation of no personal attacks, insults, or threats. We ask that you listen to what's being said. We have to speak and act professionally, allow for a balance of speaking time. We may prioritize the order of those who we haven't heard from if someone's already provided some comments or thoughts. And we may choose to limit the speaking time to 3 minutes or less. And the public can provide additional comments on the North Falcon website. That is an open forum that you can go in there and provide your comments. So those are the ground rules. I want to check in with Leah if there's anything else that I may have missed that you want to remind everyone.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I'll remind everybody again how to mute and unmute on the phone and everything when it's time.
Right, thank you. So moving back to the agenda, we've already covered ground rules. We'll walk through staff introductions next. And so I'm going to start off with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then I'll call the next other parties to identify themselves. So go ahead, Jeff, if you want to lead everyone off for Oregon.
Sure, thanks, Ryan. I'm Jeff Whistler with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm the acting Columbia River Fisheries Manager. And I know we've got a few other Oregon staff on the call. I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves. John, let's go first.
Hello, John North, acting Assistant Fish Division Administrator for Columbia Marine Program.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Jimmy Watts, Columbia River Recreational Fisheries Biologist and Acting Assistant Fishery Manager.
All right. Anyone else, Jeff, for Oregon that you see?
that covers us. Thanks, Ryan.
Okay. Next, I know we have some at least one NOAA representative. So I wonder, Jeremy, if you can introduce yourself, and if you have any other representatives, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Ryan. Jeremy Jording, NOAA's National Marine Fisheries Service. And I believe we have Tony Siniscal online, so I'll switch to Tony.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, Tony Siniscal, NOAA Fisheries.
Thank you, Tony and Jeremy. Next, I saw that Stuart Ellis is on with the Columbia River Intertribal Commission. And so I wondered, Stuart, if you can provide some introductions for Columbia River Treaty Tribe and policy members.
Good morning, Bruce Jim from Warm Springs.
Good morning, Bruce.
Good morning.
Verslakis Jr., Yakima Nation Commissioner for Quitfic.
Good morning. This is Casey Mitchell with NESPERS. I serve as the Natural Resource Subcommittee Vice Chair and Quitfic Commissioner as well. With the NESPERS Tribal Executive Committee, I serve as the Treasurer as well.
Thank you. And are there any other Columbia River tribal policy or staff members that'd like to introduce themselves? All right, we can come back if anyone else provides testimony on that as well. I'll go ahead and kick us off for Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm the Columbia River Fishery Manager, and maybe I'll shoot it up to Kelly Cunningham, and we'll kind of work back down through other WDFW staff.
Thanks, Ryan. Good morning, everybody. Kelly Cunningham, Director of the Fish Program. Glad you're all here. I'll turn it over to Charlene Hurst. Go ahead, Charlene.
Sorry, multiple mics. This is Charlene Hurst. I'm the Columbia River Management Unit Lead. Happy to see you all today.
And maybe we'll take it over to Kyle Addix, and then we can pull it back into the rest of the Columbia River folks.
Good morning. I'm Kyle Addix, Intergovernmental Salmon Manager for Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bryce.
Hi, good morning. Bryce Glasser. I'm the Southwest Washington Fish Program Manager for WDFW. I've got a couple staff that I can have introduce themselves, Matt and then Josua.
Okay, morning. Matt Gardner. I'm the District 9 fish biologist.
Good morning. Josua Holowatz, District 10 fish biologist for WDFW, Lewis and Cowles Rivers.
All right, thank you. And we've got some folks in the room with me. We'll go around the table. They'll be kind of speaking through my mic since we're all sharing one link there. But Cindy, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, good morning, Cindy LaFleur, Federal Columbia River Mid-July Coordinator.
Good morning, Tim Sipple, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, Columbia River Management Unit, Fishery Policy and Analyst.
Quentin Doherty, WDFW, Fish Biologist, Columbia River Management Unit.
All right. And Leah, I wonder if you could introduce yourself officially.
Hi, I am Leah Snyder. I am the admin for fish management and hatcheries statewide, and I'm here to help facilitate the meeting.
All right, thank you. I know we have quite a few other WDFW staff. If anyone else wants to introduce themselves, if not, we'll move on with the agenda.
Hey, Ryan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. Cassina Lee, Regional Director for Southwest Washington, just listening in this morning.
Thank you. All right. Well, if anyone needs to speak up, well, if you haven't introduced yourselves, we'll just ask that you introduce yourself like the public will. And so we're just going to go ahead and move on with the agenda. So all the information I already mentioned will be provided at the link that we have on the agenda. The rest of today, we're got a couple minutes left to walk through this agenda. The next agenda item will be the 2022 Columbia River Fisheries section. So we'll provide forecast conservation objectives, policy guidance considerations within the handout, followed by fishery modeling, rationale, and assumptions. Then we'll have a report from our USV Oregon co-managers, and then we'll turn to some public comment and questions, kind of, broad landscape questions within what was provided on the initial onset of this meeting. And then we will go into a break and spend most of today actually in our breakout. So the recreational folks, participants and interested stakeholders will stay on this line. And we'll talk about both main stem and some tributary proposals. And then the commercial interested stakeholders and commercial participants will switch to a different line, which is provided in the agenda. And that's scheduled to start at 11:15. And then we will conclude at 1. I guess you'll probably hear it multiple times today, but we do intend to bring one single in-river fishing package to the April PFMC. And because that's an ongoing process to meet our conservation objectives, we will adjust the package accordingly in order to meet those conservation objectives and policy objectives. The links are provided in the agenda for the Pacific Fishery Management Council, so you can stay tuned in if you'd like. And then both states will provide, when concluded, takes us a little bit of time to kind of finalize everything, but we will provide a preseason fishing plan for the summer and fall on each state's website. So I think that's the basic agenda. Jeff or other staff, anything else you'd like to add before we dive into the handout?
Not for me, Ryan. I think we're ready to get started.
All right, so give me 1 second. I'm going to switch over to the other handout. All right, just want to do a check that the handout's coming through. Right. All right, so the first section is largely just a review of what we went through last time in the big group session, and I'm not really planning on walking through this. This is just more reference. The forecasts haven't changed. Our conservation objectives haven't changed. They're everything we presented at the WDFW forecast meeting back in early March, and then the Columbia River North of Falcon #1 meeting on March 15th. So this is there more for reference, and has yet to, just consolidated from what we provided before. So we will speak to some of our actual objectives as necessary when we get to those, some of the questions, answers, or walking through the breakout, kind of detailed information. So just kind of orienting everyone to this. So we cover summer Chinook sockeye, steelhead, fall Chinook policy objectives and forecasts and conservation objectives. So and Coho as well. Just kind of moving on to page 2. This is where we just want to reorient everyone to what was provided and we'll be discussing in the breakout meetings. The model run that we did for Chinook incorporated the PFMC March alternative to that middle option for modeling purposes. For the in-river fisheries, we modeled what equates to a 14.5% harvest rate, but really we're focused in on that 10.4% exploitation rate, given that the ocean and river combined has an objective of being below 38%. And then the allowed is for Snake River Wild and Upper River Bright for the non-treaty fisheries is 15%. harvest rate. And for Coho, for modeling purposes, we use the March PFMC alternative high ocean option. And when you combine the in-river updated fisheries and the ocean high alternative, that equates to an 18.3 exploitation rate on the lower Columbia River natural Coho stock. The in-river component is 4.1%. And we'll get to the next page, which actually has kind of a combined set of fisheries for this fall that we're going to be discussing, that kind of sums up where the total impacts and catches. So I'm not going to go to that yet. Got a little bit to walk through here first, but that's what the next page will have. So at the last meeting, we did receive some input that staff considered. And also we heard we got some comments online and via email that staff reviewed. We compared that with our policy guidance and our conservation objectives, and took that into account into developing some alternatives for consideration. The modeling, I guess, kind of a really high level. The modeling, what we have largely provides similar to recent year non-treated commercial fisheries and for recreational fisheries above Bonneville Dam. However, due to the Little River Hatchery Tule conservation objective and kind of it being the most constraining stock, the fisheries below Bonneville Dam for the recreational fishery do incorporate quite a few modifications to get us to the 10.4% exploitation rate that I previously referenced. The policy allocation hasn't changed, and I already referenced the most constraining stock is the LRH stock. However, we are keeping an eye on the Upriver Bright, Snake River Wild component, just to make sure in case stock comp or catch rates change, given that we're about 30 to 40,000 fish above that 200,000 kind of a trigger point. And so we're just going to keep an eye on that. And we know that those runs that run will get updated in season. For modeling, we did reserve Chinook mortalities to cover recreational and Coho directed fisheries. We always have to keep an eye on steelhead impacts and make sure the options we provided today do fit, and they do fit within that. That's an expectation. And I already mentioned we received some input, and so what the following bullet points on the bottom of this page show is a recognition of some of the points and inputs we heard. So those include consideration for starting the summer ship mark selective fishery June 16th. There was ample discussion of ocean and in-river sharing balance for fall Chinook. Mark selective interest at buoy 10 for Chinook. Delay start and a days per week consideration for recreational Chinook retention seasons. Considering an angling closure at Tongue Point to West Puget Island and the Cowlitz Mouth area. We did hear about that as well. Heard some interest in keeping an eye on the overlap of Chinook retention fisheries in order to limit effort shift. We also heard about additional steelhead restrictions in both the main stem and tributary areas. For commercial, we heard about interest in ranging from a 1 to 3 days per week approach for the early August fishery, and then also retaining fish for the September and October zone 4 or 5 commercial fisheries. And lastly, enhanced tanglenet Coho directed fishery. So Jeff, I just want to check in with you if there's anything else on this list that you want to flag that we heard that we want to just recognize the input we heard at the previous meeting.
No, I don't think there's anything additional, Ryan. These were the big issues that we kind of, big comments and topics that we heard from the last meeting that we, like you said, took under consideration and discussed and thought through and modeled out some of these scenarios. But the detail of those discussions will happen in the breakouts when we get there.
All right, thank you. So moving on to page 3, we'll start on this one. I already referenced that there was a table on this page. This is just essentially the combined set of catch and impacts associated with both commercial, non-treaty commercial, and recreational fisheries for fall Chinook. And I guess the take-home message here is LRH is the most constraining, so it's at a 70-30 sharing there. And that equates to a 38. And when you combine that with the ocean catch and the alternative 2, that's a 38.7% exploitation rate, in which the limit is 38.0. And the output for the upriver bright harvest rate is 13.23%, and for the Snake River Wild is 12.78%. So this is just combined catch for both river and recreational and commercial fisheries, which we will be describing in a lot more detail in the breakout. For Coho, what we have here is the combined Coho catches within the river. So and I guess the take-home message is it shows marked and unmarked mortalities in the columns. And I already mentioned it before, the combined ocean and river catches exploitation rate equates to 18.3%. And the other element we have to keep an eye on is that upriver Coho passage to Bonneville Dam. The target is above 50%, and so we're sitting there above 60% with updated in-river Coho catch inputs, the buoy 10 fishery, and commercial, all that for this year, and the high ocean option. So with that, we kind of walk through the front end of this handout. The rest will be reserved for when we get back together in the breakout. But I just want to note, and I already mentioned it once, that we will be adjusting whatever single river package we have as necessary to meet our conservation objectives and still meet our policy objectives. So I'll come back to this when we're all done for this main session. But largely, this was just a quick review of what we heard at the last meeting. That's pretty much what this front end was. So with that, I want to check in before we move on to the U.S. co-manager staff report. I want to check in with Oregon and Washington staff if there's anything else we want to share with the public before we switch agenda items.
Not for me, Ryan.
Right, so back to the agenda, just gonna kind of reorient ourselves as we move on.
Ryan, Kyle
yes.
just Kyle put his hand up there.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Sorry, Ryan, I was slow to find the raised hand button. Just as an FYI, this morning, the Chinook Technical Committee of the Pacific Salmon Commission sent their annual memo on abundance indices and such that will go into the modeling. The next rounds of modeling that happen. It's one of the things that happens every year about this time, but we kind of have to wait on that official memo from the CTC. So that was transmitted this morning. Hard to say exactly what it will mean until the model runs get done, but generally the abundances are a little higher up there. So it looks like the West Coast, Vancouver Island, and Northern BC fisheries will increase a little from what they were last year. Don't know what that means for various exploitation rates for Columbia River and Puget Sound stocks, but just be aware that's going to be happening in the next few days here.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate that. All right, so we're going to move on to the next agenda item. I might look to Stuart Ellis to kick us off, and then get the an update and report from the tribes.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Stuart Ellis. I'm with the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, and we have a couple of brief comments that the tribes would like to provide. First, Wilbur Slockish has a comment from the 4 Columbia River tribes, and then Bruce Jim has a comment from the Warm Springs tribe specifically. So I guess we could probably start off with Wilbur if he's ready.
I'm ready. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wilbur Slockish Jr. I am a member of the Yakima Nation and a commissioner with the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. I have lived and fished along the Columbia River for my entire life. I have been asked to provide comments today on behalf of the 4 Columbia River Treaty Tribes, the Yakima Nation, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, and the Nez Perce Tribe. We normally try to minimize our comments regarding the precise structuring of non-treaty fisheries, but we do feel the need to provide comments when we have concerns about impacts to upriver stocks and upriver fisheries. In past years, we have indicated our opposition to summer season mark selective fisheries, main stem fall season mark selective fisheries, and mark selective coho fisheries. This year, we understand there is again proposal for a mark selective fishery in August at Buoy 10 that may be expanded from last year. This is an unwise proposal for several reasons. First, estuary areas are a poor choice for mark selective fisheries. The fish are making complex changes to adapt from salt to freshwater, and there is evidence that release mortality may increase in estuary areas. There can be a sharp temperature differential between the relatively cool ocean and river temperatures, which can be up to 70 degrees or more in August. These temperatures likely put fish at risk to higher release mortality. Fishery monitoring for mark selective fisheries is always more difficult and is higher levels of uncertainty. How many fish get released and what stock are they? Second, we based our initial review of the modeling of non-treaty fall fishery. We estimate that the magnitude of the mark selective fishery at Buoy 10 will cause an increase in the impact rate on the ESA listed fall Chinook in the treaty fishery. The treaty fishery expects to be able to manage for a 30% total harvest rate on the upriver bright stock. However, as mark selective fisheries become larger in the lower Columbia, they change the clip rate of fish upstream of Bonneville compared to the clip rate at the river mouth. This means that the wild harvest rate on listed fish is forced higher than the total harvest rate we manage for due to the mark selective fishery. Preliminary analysis indicates that the wild harvest rate on Snake River fall Chinook could be almost 0.5% higher than the total rate we manage for under the terms of the USV Oregon Management Agreement. We don't want to face this risk because of non-treaty fishery decisions. The privilege to engage in recreational fishing should not come at the expense of increases in the ESA impacts on the treaty fishery, which is guaranteed to our tribes through our treaty rights. Third, the Buoy 10 fishery has grown very large and has enormous fishing power, especially with the number of guided trips. This fishery has a history of exceeding its share of the non-treaty fishery impacts. We are concerned that if this happens this year, it will not only have an adverse impacts on the other non-treaty fisheries, but could affect the treaty fishery if the mark selective impacts are higher than expected. We also note that it has been challenging for the in-river non-treaty fisheries to stay within their share of the lower river Tule impacts. And we suspect that the scale of the buoy 10 fishery is part of this problem. Fourth, a mark selective fishery won't do anything to reduce overall treaty and non-treaty impacts to ESA listed stocks. It simply shifts impacts from landed catch to release mortality. It will increase wild impacts and upstream for both main stem treaty fisheries and tributary treaty and non-treaty fishery because of the changing mark rates from the mark selective fisheries. It appears that the main justification for this proposal is simply to extend the fishery through Labor Day. Just as in recent years, this run may simply not be large enough for the buoy 10 fishery to go through Labor Day. If this is such an important goal, it seems it would be more practical to start the buoy 10 fishery later so that it can go through the desired date and let people keep and eat the fish they catch. Fish are provided by our Creator as a source of food for people willing to care for the salmon. We are not showing we care for these fish by hooking them, engineering them, and tossing them back. And that concludes our statements.
And then I believe Bruce Jim from the Warm Springs Tribe has a brief comment as well.
Hi, could you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. My name is Bruce Jim. I'm a member of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs and the chairman of the Warm Springs Fish and Wildlife Committee. I am a policy representative for the Warm Springs Tribe in the United States versus Oregon Policy Committee. It is this policy committee that includes 3 other treaty tribes in the states, including the state of Oregon, that negotiated and now must faithfully implement the fishery management agreement. What I have to say supports the statement of Mr. Salakish of the Yakama Nation, but I want to emphasize some things that must be taken under serious considerations in deciding how to allocate the non-treaty share of salmon that Oregon has secured under the management agreement. Number 1, first, I have said many times, mark selective fishery do not conserve ESA listed salmon stocks. This is an untruth. States and tribes attempt to harvest their full share of each salmon run, ESA listed or not ESA listed, as set out in the management agreement. Mark selective fisheries only shift harvest from commercial to recreational fishers. There is no basis for expanding mark selective fisheries as an ESA conservation action, none. Second, just as we do not want to states to not interfere in the details of how treaty tribes take their share of salmon in their fisheries, as is set out in the management agreement, we tribes do not meddle in how the states allocate their share among recreational and state fishers unless we see problems. We do see problems in an increase in mark selective fishery in this case. As Mr. Slakish stated, when more marked fish are taken in lower river fisheries under a mark selective fishery, the number of unmarked fish increases upstream. This is where the treaty fishery occurs, and we more quickly reach the limits of impacts on ESA listed fish, which puts a treaty fishery at greater risk for closing early to protect ESA fish and stay within the limits of management agreement. Also, at Buoy 10 Fisheries, a big fleet, this fishery happens very fast. The states cannot keep up with the catch that is occurring during the season. This has happened before. The risk of that fishery harvesting more than the state planned is very real. When that happens, other fisheries must adjust and risk violating the terms of the management agreement. We do not sit by and accept this risk to the treaty fishery. Five, we have concerns that the state has not correctly applied its computer models in calculating the effects of expanded mark selective fisheries. We ask that the states work with our technical teams in establishing U.S. versus Oregon process to ensure that we are modeling all our fisheries with the best science and practice before, not after. This significant changes in how they manage lower river fisheries. we work well with those committees of U.S. versus Oregon. It is in our best. It is in all of our best interests. Be patient and use the best agreed upon science in our fisheries. That concludes my statement, and I hope you guys pay attention.
Thank you, Bruce, Jim, and thank you, Wilbert. Stuart, do you think, are there any other comments or
no, I think that that's it for today. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And really appreciate the thorough report. Glad we could create some space for you today for everyone can hear that. So thanks again. Charlene, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I also want to reiterate my thanks for the testimony that we just heard from Wilbur Slockish and Bruce Jim. I appreciate the concerns that you shared about the lower river fisheries. I do want to, sort of emphasize that we are committed to staying within the harvest constraints of the U.S.-Oregon Management Agreement. And I believe our staff work really hard to ensure that that's the case. So I think we would always be open to having conversations where there are concerns and where there are suggestions for how to do things better and more efficiently. So I appreciate those comments of that nature today. But I'm pretty confident in our management approach that the staff have developed for this season so far. And I, just wanted to recognize that we do also, manage adaptively in season, and we're tracking the catch and the fishery in real time to make sure we stay within those constraints. So appreciate the comments again. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks.
Yep, feel free to stay on as long as you'd like. And definitely we look forward to conversations I'm sure we'll have next week at the Pacific Fishery Management Council. So thanks again. All right. So I'm going to move us to the next portion. Just do a time check. It's 10:41. The agenda has has us taking a break at 11. We'll see if we can stick to that and then have our breakouts at 11:15. And as just a reminder, the commercial breakout will switch over when we get to that point, and recreation will stay here. So with that, I just want to kind of have the ground rules just kind of up on display. And right before I jump into, any public comments or thoughts or questions, clarifying questions, I just want to remind everyone that, for any specifics about actual recreational or commercial fishery structures, we want to reserve that for the breakouts if possible. So we're just kind of looking to see if there's any clarifying questions you might have that kind of help us get to that point, or something you might have missed when we gave the original walkthrough of this handout. Before I jump into that, Jeff, just check and see if there's anything else you'd like to remind everyone.
I think you covered it, Ryan. Just again, this is a chance for people to get clarification on anything we've gone through so far, and all the specific fishery structures, like you said, will be discussed in the breakout sessions. So.
Okay, great. And so definitely expect the breakout to have most of the discussion. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to keep this round to 3 minutes max, and so I'll let you know when you're there and have you wrap up. We may or may not be able to answer your questions at this session, but we are hearing and we'll recognize what we've heard. So that's we'll promise that at least. And so go ahead and raise your hands, and I will put you on speaking list, and then we will move forward with that. So I have Liz Hamilton, followed by Greg Johnson. And if you can't use the raise your hand feature, if you state your name, I'll add you to the list. And just remember, if you're on the phone, it may take *6 to unmute. So again, there's a raised hand.
All right, thank you.
So
May I start? Yeah, just before the tribal leaders leave the call, I just wanted to acknowledge the leadership that they are showing on restoring the Snake River Basin and their work with the administration, with the other tribes, with the states. It's important work, and I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you, Liz. Really appreciate that. We'll go to Greg Johnson next.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you. This is Greg Johnson. Just because I can't sit in both rooms, a clarifying point. Is there any LRH being held back post update in the recreational fishery? And then, and just for clarification, in the recreational fishery, is the intent to not have any coho or Chinook fishing past September 14th, at least above Warrior Rock? But I just want to make sure that I was reading that clearly, that the river will be closed both to Coho and Chinook from those dates on, as it exists right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Jeff, I'm wondering how much you want to provide on that. If you go ahead, and I will keep an eye on hands for a second.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can address both of those questions. It is tricky when folks have to kind of carve off a little bit, but there's obviously interest in all of the fisheries we're talking about here today from everybody. So let's see. Maybe I'll take the first one first. There's no LRH being specifically held back, and we don't have an ability to update the LRH run size in season. Is one point I want to make. We're not necessarily holding anything back in the modeling. We're modeling out the season structures that we think fit within the guidelines we're operating within right now. I mean, there will be further shaping, of course, as all of these fisheries come together, but as it stands right now, there's nothing specifically reserved for later in the season. And to the second point there, yes, generally speaking, the intent is, most specifically the fisheries upstream of Tongue Point. We're planning to have all angling for salmon it's closed when Chinook retention is closed, to avoid some of the bycatch issues that we've seen in the past in those areas. So, there will be some opportunity later in the season as we move through, as we see how fisheries progress. as we see how runs are starting to develop, in real time. There will be some opportunity to explore in-season additions, as we always do in there. So I think we'll keep our eyes open for opportunities to add either Coho only recreational opportunity or pair it up with some Chinook opportunity as well, if that comes to pass. But as it stands right now, we're kind of we got the Chinook retention seasons modeled out. We do intend for Coho to extend the entire year at buoy 10. There's some question on how far upstream necessarily that will extend. That will be part of the discussion, I expect, in the breakout discussion. But as it stands right now, for the most part, angling would be closed when Chinook retention is not available.
All right, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Greg. I don't see any more hands, so I'm going to do a last call on hands or get on the speaking list for this front end. And so quick check, and then if not, we'll have more time in the breakout, which is, I think, going to be where we want to have most of this conversation. All right, I have Robert, and then just call it good right there. So go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, thank you, Rob Sudar, commercial advisor. Could you bring up the Coho chart that you shared with us, the page it has the fall Chinook sharing and the Coho chart? I had to step out of the room for a few minutes, and I don't know if you already went over this or not, but there's something there that I would like some clarification on. That's it, yeah. So, like when you for fisheries, where you say main stem, I presume that's main stem commercial. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to add that so people know what fishery you're talking about.
Yep.
And then where you have total catch / morts, I presume that's total catch plus mortalities or including mortalities or something like that, because that sign usually means per, like total catch per mortality, and that is not correct, obviously. And so it's a little misleading on that title, in my opinion.
Yeah, those are, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, or other staff, but those are just, basically mortalities, dead fish. It's not a ratio or anything like that.
Yeah, so I think you should take out that per sign and put in including morts or something. And then on the next column where you have unmarked catch, it should just unmarked catch mortality. There's no reason to have another confusing symbol in there. But my concern is that people who don't know about this work, aren't listening in, don't know what, they find this chart and they try to figure out what it means, and it's not clear, in my opinion, the way those are titled. And then my last question is, for like in Young's Bay, you've got the total catch, including mortality, is the same as the marked kept catch, but yet you show some unmarked catch mortalities, which I presume are dip-ins of some sort. So for several of those columns, shouldn't that be additive? Shouldn't you be adding those numbers onto the total in the to get onto the number in the marked kept column to get the total in the first column, the catch plus mortalities? It's just a little, there's quite a few of those columns that aren't set up that way. And it looks to me like that table needs to be redone.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Definitely should be summed up. So we'll take a closer look at that, and also appreciate the thought on how to, provide, more clarity on what this table is supposed to represent. So definitely appreciate the input.
Yeah, that would help a lot because, and like get this one off the internet and put a new one in its place because the I don't want two of them floating out there if possible. I mean, there's no way to do that, but we certainly want an accurate table that anybody can find and understand what it says. And then my final comment is kind of aligned with Greg's that we always save some impacts, or we try to, for a September fishery, so we can have access to those later fish. And I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that our fishery appears to be the only one that's built around the prediction and isn't counting on something from the ocean to open fisheries back up again. At least I think that's what we have. And it's going to be obviously a bad look if we're fishing in September and the sport fisheries shut down. And I think that should be a consideration in terms of how you schedule these fisheries, that unless you plan on doing a really good job of informing the public over why it's that way. Perception is everything.
Appreciate that, Robert. It's a good point and good to be aware of.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, so I had said I had closed, but we still have a few minutes left before 11, so I will do this one last time. And Bryce Devine, go ahead, since we're doing well on time.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Robert's question on Young's Bay, Blind Slough, Napa Slough, Tongue Point, Deep River, it's my interpretation, I could be wrong, is that the reason for the discrepancy is that these are not mark selected fisheries. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
And that is why that's the reason for the discrepancy?
I think that's just an error in the table. I think
okay.
I have to dig into it, but I think Robert's correct. The total catch should equal unmarked catch in the marked catch.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm gonna just pull the agenda back up. And we got a couple minutes prior to 11, so we're on schedule. So I just kind of want to wrap this up with today's meeting will conclude at 1 p.m. For the recreational stakeholders or interested stakeholders. You will stay on this line. You can call in later or just stay on. We'll be muted. But we will get back together at 11:15 for the recreational stakeholders on this line. For commercial, the login information is provided in the agenda, and so you'll switch to a different line. And that meeting will begin at 11:15 as well. And just a concluding statement: we will not be coming back together, but the two sets of meetings will conclude by 1 p.m. And the staff do intend to bring one single in-river fishing package to April PFMC, and we may have to adjust fishery dates or regulations accordingly based on input received and to achieve our conservation objectives and policy objectives. So just want to reiterate that the dates and everything you see in numbers are likely and will change. That is probably a guarantee because there's still some more shaping that's likely will occur. And so just want to emphasize that we're looking for more of a conceptual set of inputs for staff to consider. So really looking forward to your input over the next through 1 o'clock. So definitely looking forward to getting back together at 11:15. So thanks everyone this morning. Really appreciate everyone jumping on, and we'll catch you all in about 20 minutes.